Let's talk about Gorbachev meets with NATO, the U.S. Secretary of State, with Baker.
Yeah.
And Baker promises not 1 inch east 3 times over on the 9th of February, 1990. Baker promises Gorbachev that NATO will not move 1 inch east of Germany 3 times over on the 9th of February, 1990.
Okay. He's not talking about NATO expanding and absorbing countries to the east. They were only talking about NATO moving into East Germany. That's all that was being discussed in that conversation.
That's actually not correct. You should read. Have you read the document? The full document?
I haven't. I've read Mikhail Gorbachev literally say that, though.
Well, here, actually, because Gorbachev changed his opinion. So what I will be sending in the chat here is the full document.
He changed his opinion after they signed the NATO agreement or before?
No. Yes, he
changed
his
opinion.
Agreement. He first of all,
formally.
Yes, I know. It was just an oral agreement or whatever.
That agreement was made when the USSR still existed. Why would they be having a conversation about whether current USSR countries would be absorbed into NATO?
This is a very cute part of the argument is that NATO made that agreement with Gorbachev as part of the Soviet Union. We didn't make that agreement with Russia, so it's null and void. That's a cute argument.
That's not what I said, though.
Is that not what you said?
Well, and I'm still struggling to figure out what all the preparatory Nazi stuff has to do with any of this.
Okay, forget the Nazi stuff. Sorry, the Nazi stuff.
Well, then why do we even bring the Nazi stuff up if it's not pertinent to this situation?
So stupid.
Because it matters later.
We'll talk about it later. It's just fuck. Okay. What I said was, when they had this agreement about NATO and East Germany, the USSR existed. It still exists. It hadn't broken up yet.
Yes.
It doesn't make sense for them conceptually to be talking about whether countries that were part of the USSR then would be part of NATO, because no one thought USSR was going to break up at that time. That's why I'm saying this has nothing to do with that topic of moving east across Europe.
Okay, so I have a question for you then. The whole point of NATO was to protect against the Soviet Union. If the Soviet Union is gone, why does NATO still exist?
That's a completely different question.
No, it's not really.
Well, we're just talking about this one specific claim about did they promise not to move east? And by not move east, does that mean not have other countries that are east of Germany join NATO? And I'm saying that was never part of the conversation.
May I read it?
You can
not once, but 3 times. Baker tried. This is from the declassified documents published by George Washington University. Not once, but 3 times, Baker tried out the not 1 inch eastward formula with Gorbachev in the 1990 meeting. He agreed with Gorbachev's statement in response to the assurances that NATO expansion is unacceptable. Baker assured Gorbachev that neither the president nor I intend to extract any unilateral advantages from the process that are taking place, and that the Americans understood that, quote, not only for the Soviet Union, but for other European countries as well, it is important to have guarantees that if the United States keeps its presence in Germany with the framework of NATO, not an inch of NATO present military jurisdiction will spread in an eastward direction.
Yeah, we're talking about into East Germany.
He said further European
east
countries.
Of Germany.
That's further past Germany.
No, okay. Listen. This question was literally directly asked of Gorbachev. Someone says,
yes, I know how Gorbachev changed his opinion. But
we have
the unclassified documents.
The person literally says, one of the key issues that arises in connection with the events in Ukraine, this is from 2014. One of the key issues that arises in connections with events in Ukraine is NATO expansion to the east. Do you get the feeling that your Western partners lied to you when they were developing their future plans in Eastern Europe? Why didn't you insist that promises be made to you, particularly U.S. Secretary of State James Baker, promise that NATO would not expand into the east, be legally and quoted? I quote, Baker said NATO will not move 1 inch further. Gorbachev responds by saying, the topic of NATO expansion was not discussed at all and wasn't brought up in those years. I say this with full responsibility. Not a single Eastern European country raised the issue, not even after the Warsaw Pact ceased to exist in 1991. Western leaders didn't bring it up either. Another issue we brought up was making sure NATO's military structures would not advance and that additional armed forces from the alliance would not be deployed on the territory of then East Germany after German reunification. Baker's statement mentioned in your question was made in that context, the context of East Germany. Everything that could have been and needed to be done to solidify the political obligation was done and fulfilled. The agreement on a final settlement with Germany said that no new military structures would be created in the eastern part of that country. No additional troops would be deployed. No weapons of mass destruction would be placed there. It has been observed all these years. So don't portray Gorbachev, I don't know why he refers himself in third person, and then the Soviet authorities as naive people who were wrapped around the West fingers. If there was naivety, it was later when the issue arose. Russia at first did not object.
Oh, ouch.
Okay. Now he did say, after he does say, the decision of the U.S. and its allies to expand NATO into the East was decisively made in 1993. And I called this a big mistake from the beginning. And I think it was definitely a violation of the spirit of the statements and assurances made to us in 1990. With regards to Germany, they were legally enshrined and being observed.
Okay, so what you're basically saying is that, and tell me if I'm incorrect, is that Gorbachev has this meeting where it's said 3 times over, not one. Why are you laughing?
Because Sargon's in the chat says, how petty and legalistic an interpretation. The truth is petty and legalistic, Sargon? Please.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
But we need to put this into the context. You're asking, why does Russia not trust the West? Because the West, NATO, made this agreement. And you're right, they didn't get it in writing. They had this agreement with Gorbachev where they said, and again, afterwards, Baker wrote to Helmut. And by the way, the thing that you're saying, Sitch, do you have the citation on what you're reading from Gorbachev, what year that was written in? I can give you the link. No, do you just know the year that he said that in?
It was 2014.
Okay. Yeah. Well, these were the unclassified.
Oh, no, this is 2014. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what I'm reading from are from the declassified documents that were recorded on February 9th of 1990. These were recorded by a legal reporter. They are under the George Washington National Archives. Okay. Right. So this is what actually was said at the time. Now, Gorbachev can change his opinion after the fact, as he has, but this is what was said at the time in 1990.
Well, what you said. You're referring to what you read before?
Yeah, I can read some more of it.
But the context is wrong.
What you read wasn't. It doesn't contradict. It doesn't contradict what he's saying now. They're not contradictory statements.
They're saying not 1 inch eastward of East Germany, which they proceeded to do. And if you would like to know exactly what they proceeded to do.
No, but why would they be arguing? Because this is what Gorbachev's saying, and what he's saying makes sense. If the time that agreement was made, when was this? 1990?
1990, February 1990.
If in 1990, there's nowhere east for NATO to go, because if you leave Germany, it's the USSR.
Totally. Them
saying it's not going to move east doesn't make sense. Obviously, NATO's not going to move into and invade USSR. Why would they be having that conversation?
Yeah, the USSR was dissolved after that.
But again, this is legalistic.
It's not legalistic.
It's the truth.
No, wait. It's not legalistic. I'm explaining the context of the statement. It's not the context of the statement was only about East Germany. It was not about countries east of East Germany, because those countries were part of the USSR. They wouldn't be having a conversation about that at that time.
It was obvious in 1990 when they were having this discussion that the USSR was collapsing, right?
I don't think it wasn't obvious. I thought it was a surprise to everyone until it basically happened. Like, people were seeing decline, but it wasn't
I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that.
Well, this is what Gorbachev is saying, and he was the guy that was there. So I don't know.
Ukraine wasn't even a nation until 1991.
Can I interject and ask a question here then?
Sure.
So Germany is reunited, and then you've got Poland, Belarus, Ukraine, whatever. They're still under the Warsaw Pact for a couple of years, and then that gets dissolved. Right. So now you have Poland, Ukraine, Belarus, all these places that are suddenly independent. Now, you think that Russia, now that this is over, and America sort of goes back on their word, not once, but twice, expanding with the Baltic states in the 2000s, you don't think Russia is going, why the hell is this former NATO entity that was supposed to be protecting against us suddenly expanding right to our border? We are supposed to be the aggressor they're moving towards. What have we done to piss them off?
Well, the problem...
is that not a legitimate question?
Right. No, that is a legitimate question. So the issue is, well, first of all, these countries ask to be part of NATO. It's not like NATO bangs on their door and puts a gun to their heads and says, join us. And they were asked to join NATO because of Russia. Once the USSR collapsed, things were very chaotic. And there was big questions about what countries would continue to be part of Russia and what countries would be independent. And we saw like the first country that had this question was Georgia. And Georgia has almost exactly the identical situation as Ukraine right now.
Yes.
You have Georgia's divided between people who want to be independent and people who want to be part of Russia. And so you have a separatist movement break off, and Russia starts supplying those separatists with arms and weapons. It's just like in Ukraine. Yeah. And then the conflict gets out of hand. Russia invades Georgia, not once, but twice, and ends up cordoning off the area with the separatists. And oh, yes, that area they cordon off just happens to coincidentally correspond with a oil pipeline that would completely cut Russia out of access from, or it would allow Georgia to cut Russia out of access from Baltic Sea to Europe gas. So this is a real concern that countries have in terms of their sovereignty.
Yes.
And they want the guarantee that Russia's not going to invade them.
Well, yeah, obviously. And let's again go back to reiterate. Sorry, I got a little bit fired up, but I agree that Russia is an aggressor in all of these situations. Mm-hmm. But when you look at what's happened, so there's this agreement, right? There's this agreement. Now you can say, well, it doesn't really matter because I didn't get it in writing. And I have to say
I'm not saying that though.
No, but I've seen that. Okay, I've seen that argument. I've seen that argument so many times of, well, stupid Ruskies didn't get it in writing. Fuck you. We're going to do what we want. And I unironically have seen that.
Why is this agreement relevant though?
Right.
Why is it relevant? Because what happened? Because again, we're trying to explain the Russian perspective on why they're reacting the way that they're reacting. Correct? That's what I've said.
These are excuses, though.
Well,
it's not an excuse. If you're a Russian and you were told that that NATO is not going to expand 1 inch eastward, and then they do it, well, it looks like the U.S. lied to you, right?
Yeah, but what if my interpretation?
And by the way, they didn't just lie to Gorbachev. They lied to Yeltsin in 1993.
So hold on a second. If my interpretation of the not move east line, which apparently was Gorbachev's interpretation in 2014, is correct.
It's not an interpretation. It's in the minutes.
Then they didn't break the deal.
No, but what I'm saying is that they didn't break the deal, and it's just people not understanding the context of the conversation.
Right.
Then all that means is that Putin says that, and he's telling Russian people that, but he's just lying.
Yeah,
it's
he's
not
lying
what
his
the
ass
conversation
off.
was.
It's not lying. Here's the other documents from Yeltsin in 1993. Where he's told the same thing, that NATO expansion is not going to happen. And what happens? What happens in 1993? The Clinton administration, in alliance with NATO, tells Yeltsin again, we're not going to move. We're not going to keep moving eastward. And then what happens? They move eastward.
Where in the thing the 1993 conversation take place? Because I haven't seen that.
I just posted the link.
No, but I mean, like in the link. What am I looking for here? Because this is why I'm confused, because I have an article from 1993 and it says Russian President
these documents were declassified in 2018.
No, I understand that.
But the documents are from 1993.
I'm just saying, point me to where you're reading then in this article, or tell me what I can control F to look at the segment you're talking about.
You don't have that 1 inch east in this, but it's okay. Yeah, green light. That would be it.
Is it the U.S. green light document notes that almost immediately
seemed to give a green light to NATO expansion? Nelson himself said about a discussion of possible NATO expansion with his public remarks in Warsaw in August of 1993, where he acknowledged the Helsinki Act rights of countries to choose their alliances seemed to give a green light of NATO expansion. The U.S. green light. And by the way, and this is not what they were asking for. And when it turns to the green light of NATO expansion, what happens? They do engage in NATO expansion.
Okay, but this is why I'm confused, because I have an article. This is from 1993, August 25th, 1993. And it says, Russian President Boris Yeltsin said Wednesday, his nation must respect Poland's desire to join NATO because both nations are sovereign and the old big brother relationship is over. Yeltsin and Polish President Lech Walesa also announced that the last Russian troops, some 2,500 unarmed soldiers guarding former Soviet garrisons in Poland, will be pulled out by October 1st, 3 months ahead of schedule. Yeltsin was in Warsaw to sign a series of cooperation agreements with Poland, blah, blah, blah. The ice of distrust has melted between our countries, Yeltsin said in comparing his Warsaw visit with that of her visit to Moscow. Although many issues still separate the two countries, which have been historically distrustful of each other, the wording of joint declarations signed by the two presidents indicate a change in Russia's outright opposition to NATO membership for any of its former satellites. Quote, times have changed and now there exist two sovereign countries, Yeltsin said, following the brief signing ceremony. One has to respect their positions.
I mean,
And
but if you
Yeltsin
look
was
at-
president of Russia
Russia at the time,
Yeah.
yes.